One thing has always fascinated me about Bach. His music never seems to stand still. Every phrase feels as though it knows exactly where it's going. Even in the quietest moments, there's a sense of purpose. I've lived with Bach's music for many years, but I don't think I really understood that until quite recently. During the COVID lockdowns, while I was teaching in Thailand, I set myself the challenge of relearning all 6 partitas. I didn't have access to a harpsichord, so I returned to them on the piano. At first, I thought I was simply relearning familiar music. Instead, I found myself hearing it quite differently, and it made me start asking a question. By the time Bach published these works together in 1731, he had already written the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier, the Brandenburg Concertos, hundreds of cantatas, and some of the greatest organ music ever composed. So why these? Why did these become his Opus I? Not his first compositions, of course, but the first works he chose to publish together as the opening statement of his keyboard music. That choice has always intrigued me, because I don't think it tells us simply what Bach wrote. I think it tells us what he wanted people to hear. There's another interesting clue. Bach wasn't the first Leipzig cantor to publish a collection called the Clavier-Übung. His predecessor Johann Sebastian had already done that. Bach even adopted the same title. He was acknowledging a tradition, but I don't think he was content simply to continue it. He wanted to show what it could become. At first glance, the first partita looks almost ordinary. A prelude, an allemande, a corrente, a sarabande, 2 minuets, a gigue, a sequence of familiar dances. Except, listen to the allemande. Don't think about dance for a moment. Listen instead to the direction of the music. Every phrase grows naturally from the last. Nothing feels static. Nothing feels routine. When I first learnt this movement years ago, I admired its elegance. Returning to it during lockdown, something else struck me. The music never simply unfolds. Every phrase seems to be searching for the next idea. There's an extraordinary sense of purpose. And once I noticed it, I began hearing it everywhere. The corrente changes everything. Suddenly the music becomes lighter, more agile, more playful. But notice that the sense of direction never disappears. Every movement opens a different musical world. That's one of the things I admire most about Bach. He never seems satisfied with repeating an idea. Even when he begins with something as familiar as a dance, he immediately starts transforming it. The dances aren't really the destination, they're the starting point. Then comes the sarabande. Time seems to slow. The music becomes quieter, more reflective. This is probably my favourite movement in the partita. Not because it's dramatic, but because of its extraordinary restraint. Everything unnecessary disappears. Every note seems to matter. For me, this is where Bach's personality comes through most clearly. A composer completely in control of his material, never trying to impress, simply allowing the music to speak. The 2 minuets remind us where this music began. They still carry the character of the dance, but Bach is no longer writing music for people to dance to. He's using those familiar dance forms as a framework for something much more ambitious. The more I returned to these pieces, the more I realised that dance wasn't really the point. It was the language Bach chose to speak. What mattered was what he had to say. The gigue brings everything together. Energy, counterpoint, joy, confidence. By now we're a long way from the ballroom. We've spent 6 minutes listening to a composer introducing himself, and I think that's why these works became his Opus I. Not because they were his first masterpieces, they certainly weren't, but because within these 6 partitas, Bach could show every side of his imagination. French elegance, Italian brilliance, German counterpoint, technical mastery, emotional depth, everything that made him Bach. Looking back, I'm rather grateful I relearned these pieces on the piano during those months in Thailand. Without a harpsichord, I stopped worrying about the instrument and started listening more closely to the music itself. And that's when I realised something. The more I've lived with the first partita, the less I hear a collection of dances. Instead, I hear a composer introducing himself to the world. Perhaps that's what Bach wanted people to hear all along. Thank you for watching.